Yeah, so let's start with social contract theory because that's the theory that we all sort of have a social contract between the government and us,
Right.
and we gave them that authority. But of course, there's no explicit agreement. There's no like when you become a citizen, you don't sign a piece of paper saying,
Right.
"Hey, like I agree that the government can coerce and do all these things." And if you look at things from the perspective of natural law, which I think is really the only legitimate way to morally justify anything, then they don't have such an authority because there's no agreement. And the author goes through what a normal agreement looks like, what a normal contract looks like. Among other things, both parties have some obligation to the other.
Yeah.
But if the government doesn't protect you from looters or something like that, then that doesn't it doesn't automatically mean that you don't have to pay your taxes or something, right? Like that's
right.
like which would be the case in any normal contract,
Yeah.
right? If
They don't perform.
if they don't perform like some duty, if they don't collect your garbage, for example, you shouldn't have like that would be the case in like a normal, like if you're the waste management firm for my neighborhood and you don't collect the garbage, I have no obligation to pay you. But with government, it's not like that at all. Whatever you do, you have to pay your taxes, even if they don't fulfill any of the things that they're supposed to fulfill on your behalf. So that dual obligation aspect definitely, I think, nullifies this social contract theory. But there are lots of other reasons, including the fact that you can't really opt out of it, right? Or you can't say, hey, I don't want to be a part of this. You're kind of coerced into the authoritarian structure that that they say you have. So I don't think social contract theory holds any water, and the author gets into why so many people seem to be carrying water for the regime, and part of that is some of the psychological biases that we have. But we could kind of see it already, right? Like even in politics today, there are people that will justify almost anything that the regime does. And part of it might be that they're getting paid directly by the government in some way, shape, or form. But mostly it's because they don't want to believe that they have to go and do stuff that puts them in danger or something to that effect. I think it was our friend Peter St. Onge who wrote about how, why is it that women and sort of like weak men end up supporting the Democrats? And his argument was that actually it's more important for people with less agency or people that feel vulnerable or feel like they're unsafe to more be in the right group than to pursue truth. And that seems to definitely be the case here with supporting the regime. There are a lot of people that will sort of like do all kinds of mental gymnastics to justify that. And this is kind of like it honestly reminds me a lot of Keynesian economics, where people will come up with just like the stupidest theories, but as long as they support the people in power,
the money printer,
they'll just sort of propagate it as if it's truth.
Yes,
and you get a lot of people whose brains are completely twisted and sort of kind of go crazy because if you lie too much, you just you can't
you're
sort
out
of live with yourself.
reality.
You go crazy.
Yeah. How much does memetics play in this, do you think? Because one of the things that I see is, capture money printer or capture political authority, use political authority and or money printer to, I don't use the word hire, I guess, people of influence, whether these are cultural figures, athletes, actors, whatever it may be, to be pro money printer and political authority. And then the masses just unconsciously imitate these cultural leaders. And so that's like a very vicious cycle, because then you get more power, more money printer, and then you can just wash, rinse, repeat. How much do you think that plays into this propagation of the illusion that we need political authority to have order in our lives?
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. And I mean, just in general, there is that mimetic force of desiring something that other people that you see as high status.
Yeah.
And the entire status game, I think, is influenced significantly by fiat money. So to be an investment banker in today's economy is very prestigious. And a lot of rent-seeking positions actually end up that way, even though they're not very fulfilling. The people in them are very sad, and they're constantly like depressed and trying to.
But they're well paid.
Yeah, they're very well paid, right? And those, but that sort of like status hierarchy is what causes that mimetic contagion, right?
Yeah.
So if you are at the top of the status ladder, well, a lot of people seek to imitate you, even if it's like almost satanic. Some of that stuff is just like you hear about like what Diddy's doing and all that, and it's just like, okay, people imitate like what is clearly evil, almost even just to kind of get into that. So it doesn't surprise me that a lot of the apologetics for the regime, if you will, happen, because that's in a way a way to increase your status within this fiat system. And it's not a surprise to me that most of the Bitcoin community is sort of outside that status hierarchy in many ways, or have rejected at least some parts of it. And that's the commonality I find is, okay, if you are still bought into that game, you have zero interest because you're probably fairly high up on the status ladder. You would much rather continue that and like support the regime rather than go onto this new status ladder, or I guess a community, a more positive sum game or whatever in the Bitcoin community. Yeah,
no, that's a great point, and I think it's an underappreciated connection between the economic paradigm and what people are doing, right? Because if you can. If you can make a good living stealing, a la, I always pick on Putin, but insert whatever statesman you want here. Putin has his $200 billion net worth or whatever it is, all from stealing. Well, a lot of guys are going to imitate that. Like, well, he did it and he's at the top of the heap. Well, I think I'll do it too. But if you go into a world where the stealing is not so profitable and you can't have a $200 billion net worth statesman, or you could put a Nancy Pelosi in here, right? Where she makes,
or Mitch McConnell or whoever.
She makes a few $100,000 a year, but her net worth is, I don't even know.
$200 million.
$200 million. People are going to imitate that. But if you're in a world where the stealing is not profitable or less possible, let's say, well, then people are going to imitate productive strategies for creating wealth. So there seems to be this connection between like the economic paradigm and what is being culturally propagated via imitation that is, I scarcely can understand this, but it seems like there's a deep connection there.
There is. But I would say that within the fiat economy, money and status have become very, very closely linked, right? Where to the point where somebody like Warren Buffett, who is, who hasn't built or created any goods or services, he's just sort of like push money around, but he's like super well respected, right? He's very high on the status ladder. Which at least traditionally wasn't the case. So like you look at biblical times, some of the most despised people were tax collectors and prostitutes. And if you look at that time period, prostitutes probably made a lot of money just because it was just so rare for people to do that. So the price on prostitution would go up because there's less supply and there's a lot of demand and so on. Similar with tax collectors, but they didn't have very high status, right? And this is one of the things in the Bible that you learn is that money and status weren't necessarily correlated at that time, in large part because tax collectors, they were seen as like completely rent-seeking, and they definitely were. They just collected more tax than they needed to, and they used that as profit. So there are times and places where the status hierarchy depends on something other than money. But in a fiat economy, especially sort of with the breakdown of morality and sort of like that move away from natural law, it's become sort of almost the only measure that people are willing to sort of notice.
Yeah.
And in that way, it becomes even worse because because now it's you can justify almost anything as long as you make money. I made bank, so who cares, right? Like it becomes it's horrible.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, and at least in a sound money world, even the rich are going to be people that have rendered the most useful work or favors to society. So it's like the status is somewhat warranted to the degree they do get status for being rich. It's like, well, okay, you solved a lot of problems for people. Like maybe you do deserve high status, and we want people to imitate you. You know, successful entrepreneur guy, but we don't want people to imitate the coercive political authority figures. Right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of them, and people imitate them like to a crazy degree. Which I mean, in a sense, I suspect that Diddy was imitating somebody, right? Like, it was
his handlers, probably.
Yeah, and a lot of people in politics that sort of like they seem to want to create these weird cults of personality around themselves and so on to gain power. They're almost imitating like Kim Jong-un or something. Right? It's really weird that way. But that's the path of nihilism. That's the path
which gets back to the crypto shitcoinery, because a lot of those are little money cults too, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money. And be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.